The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Thursday, July 5th, Friday, July 6th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and the Deep Talk radio network. We are welcoming you to tonight's show. We apologize about the earlier snafu about the audio, but the main thing is we got it going right now, and it's sounding good. You can usually watch us on Periscope every Monday through Friday, and if you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free. Yes, free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. We offer you a great show tonight. We're going in a direction that we never have, and I'm excited about it. Because, you know, usually we are always trying to find ways to talk about the paranormal around here. But tonight, we're heading to the highest peak in the world, Mount Everest. The legends and the mystic lore of the great mountain has thrilled men and women for decades. Sir Edmund Hillary was the first noted Westerner to climb the mountain before oxygen tanks were available. However, the mountain also has a sinister side, which has claimed more than 280 mountaineers who went up but never came down, like the famous Green Boots. whose body is now a landmark towards the hallowed summit. Nelson Dellis is a 4-time world memory champion, and he has made it to Everest 3 times, almost dying once, a scare his 3rd time around, yet the mountain keeps calling his name. He's heard the legends. He's faced the dangers head on. He's still here, and he's here to tell his story. It's one of skill, discipline, fear, and emotion all wrapped into one. Nelson Dellis, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
You know what? I am very excited to have you on, and I apologize about the audio snafu there that killed kind of the first couple of minutes, but the main thing is we got it figured out, we got it going, and we're going to have an absolute great show. My friend, I got to tell you, I literally have been looking for the last couple of years to try and find someone to talk about Mount Everest. And it almost is like, you know, they'll go if the television cameras are on, but they don't want to do the radio shows. So I want to say a big thank you to you for joining us and our audience to tell your amazing, amazing story.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share everything that I know, all the experiences that I've had. It's funny, I was telling you this earlier, but it's bizarre that not many people wanted to do this. I feel like anybody who's been on Everest or climbed Everest wants to talk about Everest, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. We've seemed to have had some troubles, you know, getting someone, but sometimes the topics are like that. Sometimes they are just weird, they're odd, and I don't really get it. But nonetheless, you know, we got you, and that's all that matters tonight, because not only are you a mountaineer, you've climbed some amazing peaks, but you're also a 4-time world memory champion. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's kind of an obscure little thing that I'm involved with. It's actually what I do full time. Is I teach people how to improve their memories, and I compete in memory competitions around the world. And I know that sounds kind of bizarre, but it's something that I kind of fell into, and it's something that's self-taught. I've practiced this for the past 10 years, and it's something I taught myself.
You have to explain what a world memory champion is. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And how do you discipline your mind for that?
Yeah. Well, first, to be technically correct, it's the U.S. champion, not the world. The world champion level is quite a bit higher than mine at the moment. But either way, it's still a pretty cool title to have. And yeah, I mean, I started because I was interested in memory, and specifically my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I was just fascinated in a weird way of how it was, you know, taking my grandmother's memory away. It was bizarre to watch and sad to see her disappear like that, but it got my interest in memory peaked. And when she actually passed away, that's when I started really thinking to myself, okay, let me see if there's something I can do for my average memory, so that when I get older, hopefully something like that won't happen to me. And I discovered this championship, this U.S. memory championship, which basically, it sounds like what you might think is it's just a bunch of nerds or people with incredibly good natural memories coming together to memorize a ton of stuff. That's kind of what it is, except for the fact that it's all people who are trained. You'll actually never really find anybody who claims to have a naturally good memory. And it's based on techniques that were invented by the Greeks thousands of years ago. And it's just a bunch of practice after that, like any skill.
As silly as it may sound, you know, exercising the brain and the memory can only be good for you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And you know, in this day and age, we don't really use memory in the same way that we had to in the past, right? I mean, we have our phones, we have our computers. Google is at our fingertips, so we never really need to hold information or facts or things that we typically had to have on the tip of our tongues in the past, you know?
I just can't figure it out because, you know, I used to be really good with numbers, like phone numbers. I had everything memorized. And then the minute the smartphones came out, I can barely remember my parents' cell phone numbers, let alone my wife's or somebody like that. Technology has really replaced basic thinking, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's nice, but also not so nice at the same time. And I mean, if you think about like if you pull out your phone right now and you dialed a number that you just internally knew, it probably is going to be a number like your childhood home phone number or your best friend's phone number from when you were a kid. And that's pretty crazy. I mean, I still remember my friend's phone number when I was in sixth grade because I typed it in so many times and I had to know it if I wanted to call him. But nowadays we don't need to do that. And I mean, I know a few numbers because I have to be memorizing numbers as a memory champion. But most people, they don't know their significant other's phone number. It's crazy.
So how did you turn from four-time U.S. memory champion into mountaineer? Did you always have an interest in mountaineering?
Yeah, good question. So I grew up, my father was a businessman and we were always traveling from one place to the next for his work. And I found that we were always kind of around mountains. And if we traveled for vacation, it was always to mountains. And I had this interest in mountains, but I didn't really translate that into climbing until I visited New Zealand. I'm a Lord of the Rings nerd. So I went when I was in college for summer, and I stayed with this girl whose father showed me pictures of him climbing Mount Cook, which is the highest peak down there. And I had never seen anyone that wasn't just like a professional mountaineer show me pictures like this. I'd never seen that anybody, just this regular guy, could just be a mountaineer and climb to the top of this peak. So once I saw that, it kind of stayed in me for years, and eventually, and this was kind of when I started getting interested in a bunch of stuff, including the memory. I was like, you know what, I'm going to see if I can climb a mountain. Let me find something moderately challenging, close to home, and let me take a course and see how it goes. And so my first kind of foray into mountaineering was on Mount Rainier. I did like a 7-day course, basic mountaineering course, with a company out there, and yeah, we learned how to climb it. We summited the peak, and I hated it. But it was one of those things that's like, well, they call it type 2 fun, right? Where it's kind of shitty when you do it, but then afterwards, you think about it and you're like, I want to do that again. The challenge was incredible, and I'd like to take that to the next level.
Yeah, but Mount Everest, man. I mean, that's just pushing yourself to your limits and almost death. And we're going to get into that as the show goes on. But did you have your eyes set on Everest at that time, or was it like a drug where the high was so great when you finally hit a peak that you had to go higher and higher, no pun intended, on the mountaintops?
Yeah, I mean, on Rainier, I mean, one could dream, right? Of course, I had been reading a few of the staple Everest books, like Into Thin Air, Left for Dead, and I was just fascinated with, the highest point on Earth. But having just climbed this peak, I was, taking small strides. But of course, I wanted to maybe somehow find a way to get to Everest. And, back then I had no idea how I was going to be able to manage 2 months on a mountain like this, and where I was going to get the funding, and if I even had the skills to do it, or how I would go about it. But bit by bit, over the years, I finally managed to do all of that. It's kind of crazy to think that I did, but yeah, it was in the back of my mind. I wouldn't say I was aiming for it just then, but it was stirring.
A lot of people don't even know how to book a trip to Mount Everest. It's not just, booking a plane to Nepal and flying over there and say, hey, let's go climb Everest. It isn't like that at all, is it? Take us through the steps. Yeah. Take us through the steps, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is to have the experience. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who go to Everest with very little experience, and sometimes you'll hear stories of them summiting, having no experience. They've never even put crampons on before. And I have to say that's probably a lot of luck. But you also find a lot of accidents and people who get sick or even die who are very inexperienced because of that. So it's getting more and more strict over the years, which is good. But the typical way it works is, okay, you build up the experience through, skill building climbs, and then you try your hand at something a little higher in altitude, because that's really where the dangers can amount. And so you want to maybe try a peak that's over 6,000 meters, and you can do that in South America, in the Andes. There's some high peaks there, or you can go to the Himalayas and do that. And then, some more and more companies these days are requiring you to have had past experience climbing above 8,000 meters, which there's 14 peaks around the world that are 8,000 meters or higher. These are called the 14ers, 8,000 meter peaks. And so that's part of it. So when you basically have to find a company that will help you with the logistics. It's obviously very remote out there, and the expedition takes a long time. It's about 2 months, and you need food, gas, just everything to support you for that amount of time. So companies do that. There's a big business there, and then you submit kind of a resume to this company, and you also got to have the money to pay for it, which can range depending on what kind of support you're going to get. And then you buy your ticket, to Kathmandu.
How do you train for this, though? It's not just doing aerobics and a lot of running and hill climbing, is it? Like, the physical training has to go on for what, a year? 2 years in order to make a run like this?
Yeah, I feel like most people that are climbers or who have a serious interest in climbing, they are generally always exercising to an intense level. I've never really met anybody who was going to do this who, just started exercising really hard, 6 months prior. So when people ask me, what do I do? I mean, for me, it's my way of life. Every day I'm working out 1.5 to 2 hours really intensely. And that's just what I love to do. I do tailor it a little bit differently leading up to a climb, just because the way that I train when I'm not about to go climb isn't very mountain friendly, I guess, because I'm working on muscles all over my body, whereas on a mountain, mostly you're using legs and your back, right, to carry stuff. So I do change it up a little bit, but it's a fascinating thing when you get to high altitude. What works, what you think might work may not. And I've seen marathon runners, ultra marathon runners, attempt Everest and fail. Just their body couldn't handle it. They petered out. And then I've seen guys who drink beer the whole expedition and don't do very well at the beginning, but then when it comes time for the summit push, they just power through. So it's bizarre.
I could not imagine. I mean, I used to work in sports radio, and it was around athletes all the time. And every type of athlete is so different. Like, the hockey players train differently than football players and baseball players comparatively to tennis, golf, if you call golf a sport. It's amazing how different everything is. What was the hardest part about getting your body ready? Was it building up the power in your chest for your lungs? Was it, the flexibility that maybe yoga would have came into play here?
It's, for me, I think it's probably just building up the endurance for the long days. I mean, some of the days you're climbing are, the summit days can be 10 to 15 hours of just climbing, and you're at high altitude, so that just makes everything harder. So those kind of long days, and that boils down to kind of a mental push. So, you try to do some longer workouts or runs where it's not so much about like really pushing yourself, but just kind of like not stopping and learning how to mentally just keep going without, getting tired.
Is it more a mental stress than it is to have that physical stress and the physical workouts that you need to do?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, but I think and this is tough because, we'll get into this, but I haven't summited. I've come so close, and I always think that I'm mentally strong, but I wonder if the thing that's maybe holding me back, maybe a tiny fraction of that is the mental strength. And so maybe that's something I need to work on a little more if I really want to get to the top. So I definitely think mountaineering is way more mental than a lot of people who don't know much about it might think. Because it's just making your body, your leg, make that one extra step, right? When everything in your mind is screaming for it not to happen,
When you look at it, Nelson, and you were preparing for Mount Everest, how intimidating is it to know that your trip is booked, you're heading to Nepal or Kathmandu, and it's time? That has to be just a flurry of emotions that you personally are going through, plus your family, because they don't know if they're going to see you again, and vice versa.
Yeah, my family for sure, and then over the years, it's my earlier climbs was with another girlfriend, but most recently with who's my wife now. It's always been difficult. For one, I'm leaving for 2 months. That's not fun, and I'm going to a place where it's not necessarily easy to just give me a phone call. And then, they don't know what can happen. But the thing is I remember, and this is always the case when I go climb a mountain, is I'm just so excited. I don't really think about the dangers. It's this strange thing because once I'm there, you see the mountain, you see people slip and fall, and you see the crevasses, you hear the avalanches and the earth kind of moving around you, but it never really translates into, wow, I could die, or this is very dangerous what I'm doing. You just kind of are in the moment, and you justify it all as just being, it's not going to happen to you. You're just there to do something you love, and that's it. So there's a bit of nerves, but once you're on the mountain, surprisingly, with, death almost staring you in the face, it doesn't feel that bad or scary.
As strange a question as this may be for you, are you able to get insurance for that just in case?
Yep. So a lot of the companies, the outfitters, require that of you, some rescue insurance. And there's companies out there that will provide you a kind of mountaineering, extreme adventuring insurance. And it's pretty good. I mean, it came in very handy last time. I got a bit sick high up, and the company I use it's called Global Rescue, if anybody's interested. They had helicopters ferrying people out who needed help, and they were right there to help me too.
When you were looking at Everest and deciding whether or not that you wanted to give this a try, did you look at the dangers? Did you look at both sides of the coin and say, look, there's a lot of dead people on there, and when Mother Nature fires up around Mount Everest, she is uncontrollable. She's wild. She's the Wicked Witch of the East, and we hear, so you can use any type of adjective you want on that, or, but I mean, did you look at the dangers and think, wow, this is something that could happen? Or did you look at it personally, Nelson, and say, I'm tuning that out. I've got my goal. I've got my focus. This is where I'm going.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And, once I had that goal in my mind, I just, I'm just visualizing myself standing on top of the world, right? And whatever it takes to get there is kind of how I feel about it. However selfish that may sound, but that's the goal that I had in my mind, and I wanted to get there. And of course, there's the dangers that you hear about, but when it comes to mountaineering, you just focus on the things you can control, which is, are you prepared mentally? Do you have the skills to rescue yourself if something bad happens? Do you have a bit of experience with that? Are you with a company or with climbers that you trust? And if you take care of that, and some people don't. Some people go willy-nilly. They just show up with very little experience. They go with companies saving $1 or $2, and then you're introducing more risk. But if you try to minimize that, then at the end, it's just, the mountain and you. And if the mountain decides that it's time to swallow you up, then that's the case. And this is what my wife will argue with me, is I'm putting myself in this risk. Why do that? And I mean, look, there's risk everywhere, right? I could easily get hit by a bus when I cross the street, especially living in the city that I live in. Miami drivers are horrible. In the same way, if a mountain has an avalanche and I'm there, then that's the case. But you hope that your experience and the people you surround yourself with will minimize that risk.
Do you have to have the death chat with yourself?
Yeah, sure.
What's that realistic. Like for those of us who've never had that? What goes through your mind? What goes through your emotions when you have to talk to yourself about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, sitting here and maybe sitting here before I leave for a climb is one thing. In some of the situations I've been up high where, I was probably very close to that, it's different. But here, it's just coming to accepting the fact that, yes, this sport or this activity can lead to accidents and potentially death. And am I okay with that? Yes, because, look, there's so many ways anybody could die, and I don't want to regret anything. I know it would be a horrible thing for my family and all those who love me and are close to me that I would just disappear like that, doing something like this that they probably didn't approve of. But to me, it's what makes me happy. And if I die doing the thing that I'm happiest of, then how can that be a bad thing, right?
How do you make that choice now, though? I mean, you've been married a couple of years and, you're probably looking to extend the family in the next little bit here. How do you go about, telling your wife and looking her in the eye and saying, I need to do this. This is something that I have to accomplish in my life. I mean, I don't think anybody can really understand that, like you and I talked in our pre-interview, that literally Mount Everest is calling you. It's haunting you.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a grin on my face because you're saying exactly the things that I'm having conversations with my wife about now, just because she's 7 months pregnant. We're having a baby boy in a couple of months. And I was actually supposed to go to Everest again this year. And we found out we were pregnant in last December. So I had to, we talked about it. Do I go while she's pregnant and get this out of my system before the baby comes? Or, do I stay with her during her pregnancy, which ended up being the obvious choice. I didn't want to leave her going through that. But yeah, going forward, we're now a family, and what am I going to do? For me, my desire doesn't change. I still have that calling. I still love the feeling of climbing. Does it change things a little bit? Yeah, probably a little bit in terms of maybe the decision making I make as I climb. Maybe I'd be a little more cautious. Not to say that I'm reckless, but you have a few extra things to consider now. But the feeling isn't going away, and it's a difficult conversation to have. But I need to be out there. So yeah, I have to figure that out.
It is the itch that just won't stop, that you can't stop scratching. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here in regards to it. And obviously know the dangers, but I mean, now that you're going to be a dad, and please accept all of our congratulations from our listeners to you becoming a dad, because it's one of the greatest challenges you'll have, bigger than Everest, I can tell you that.
And that's true. That's true. I know there is that itch for the mountains, but I also recognize that this is going to be one of my highest and greatest adventures as well. So,
I hear you. I hear you there. My little guy just turned 5 the other day, and
nice.
Yeah. And, like even coming down to the studio sometimes, like tonight, he's turning into such a daddy's boy now. Like he had a hold of my hand. He's like, don't go to work. And I'm like, Dad has to. Dad has to go to work. And he's like, no. And, you get that child tantrum that makes you feel about 2 inches tall. It really sucks when it happens. But, nonetheless, you get to the mountain, you're focused, you're around people who are, of the same ilk. What's it like getting there, and when the first time you see the mountain? Are you seeing it from the plane, or are you seeing it when you finally start to make your way up to Base Camp 1?
Yeah, so I've actually never seen it from the plane. I know some people, it depends on where you fly from. Some people fly to from China, from Lhasa to Kathmandu, and you can see it because you'll fly over. Well, if the weather's good, I guess. But I've never seen that. So for me, it's always been, there's been a reveal at some point as you approach the mountain, and that's always a special moment. And actually, I should touch on this. There's actually 2 sides to climb the mountain. You can either go through Nepal or through Tibet from the north side, and they're respectively called climbing it from the south side or the north side. And they're 2 totally different approaches, and almost feels like climbing 2 different mountains because the routes are totally different with each their own sets of challenges. And so from the north side, for example, when you're in Tibet, you can actually drive up to base camp in a Jeep. And what's amazing about that side is you literally turn a corner in this bus or car that you're in, and there is the whole thing, just bam, staring you in the face. I have this YouTube video where that corner is shown in a video, and it's just insane. I remember our whole bus just staring at it and being like, we have to climb that, because we're at the very bottom, and you can see all the way to the top. It's really an amazing reveal. And then on the south side, though, it's kind of tucked away in the valley. So there's this beautiful hike that you have to do. And a lot of people do that as a challenge, the Everest Base Camp trek, where you fly into a small town. This is from Kathmandu. You fly into a town called Lukla by a small prop plane. And then it's like a 7-day hike into base camp. And it's beautiful. You go, through different kind of landscapes and stay in these tea houses with the locals. It's really cool. But there's kind of maybe 2 days in, through the cracks of the trees, you can kind of catch a glimpse of the tip of Everest. And it's like, wow, and then as you get closer, you make bends around different valleys and mountains, and you keep seeing her kind of lingering in the distance, getting closer and closer. And then eventually you're right at her base. But on the south side, from base camp, you actually can't see the top of the mountain, which is kind of interesting. So you have to actually climb up a little ways to Camp 2. You can kind of Camp 1 and 2, you can see it, but from base camp you can't see it.
So when you get there, and whether it's your first time or you've been up there 3 times, are a lot of the same people there that you've recognized before, or is it always a rotation of different faces, different Sherpas, different guides?
Yeah, it's actually a small community. Granted, there are always new people, wanting to come in and attempt it, and young climbers and that are up and coming or whatever. But yeah, you often see a lot of the same faces, especially the Sherpas and the company organizers and guides. They've been on Everest for 10 years, 20 years. And they've had multiple summits under their belts. So you see a lot of those faces, and that's kind of a nice thing. You see people that you haven't climbed with in years, or that you saw once in passing as you were climbing up, they were climbing down, and you had a quick little conversation about mountains. You run into those people all the time. It's a cool little community. And the nice thing is we all have the same mindset, and Everest is always kind of something that you don't, or it just mountains in general, you can't really explain it to someone fully unless they've done it. So it's hard to explain the feeling that goes into it, but these people, they get it. And so it's nice to kind of be in that little group.
Now, there is a finite window to actually peak Everest during the year. How long does it take to get from base camp to Everest? Because I do believe, if my research is correct, you have to climatize yourself at every step of the way, do you not?
That's right. Yeah. So Everest is, depending on meters or feet, what do you guys use there in Canada?
I'm still on feet on that one. I could go either
Got it,
or.
yeah.
I'm
Okay.
ambidextrous that way.
Got it. Yeah. All right. So it's 29,035 feet or 8,850 meters. And so that's pretty high. That's where, some jet airliners fly. So if you took someone, who was at sea level and plopped them at that height, they'd be dead probably in a few minutes. There's a third of the oxygen up there than down at sea level. So your body is not used to that. Incredibly, though, with the proper acclimatization, you can survive up there for an extended amount of time. And by acclimatizing, all that really means is you're getting your red blood cell count up, right? That carries more oxygen through your blood. And that's what naturally happens when you go somewhere at higher elevation. If you go to, say, the Rockies or somewhere, say 7,000 feet or higher, you'll feel tired, you'll feel out of breath. And that's because you're not getting in as much oxygen as you're used to. So, but give it a few days and, you'll kind of get better and better. You'll feel normal eventually. And that's because your red blood count is higher. You're grabbing more air, out of the air, more oxygen out of the air to put into your blood. So, yeah, where were we? What was it?
Well, just in regards to climatizing yourself each step of the way, what's the timeline like on that?
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that it's a 2-month process, give or take. I mean, and maybe we can talk about this later, but more recent expedition groups are trying to cut that down in time. But it's about 1 month you spend just acclimatizing. And then the second month is spent just waiting for the right weather. And it's kind of this game of the two things to allow you to summit. So that month of acclimatization, what are you doing? So you get to base camp, you kind of hang out there for a while because it's already pretty high. It's on both sides, it's averaged about 17,000 feet. That's where you're sitting. And that's where your base camp is, right? That's where you live basically for those 2 months. And what you'll do is you'll do kind of rotations up the mountain to different elevations, hang out there a little bit, come back down, recoup, then go up a little higher, come back down. And it's kind of this game of going up, down, until your body, has created enough of those red blood cells so that it's comfortable. It's never fully comfortable, but more comfortable at these extreme elevations.
I didn't realize that. So do they have like a team of doctors down below who are checking your red blood cells to make sure you're getting the energy? Like, is there anybody down there who can say, we don't think you're ready, you're not making this climb?
Okay, so there are doctors around base camp. There's actually an ER on the south side, an Everest ER, in case you're sick or something's really wrong. But most companies or outfitters have either a doctor assigned to the team, or at least some medical knowledge and medicine as well to help treat certain things that can happen at altitude. But it's not like they're taking blood and they have all this equipment to check that you're ready. They do use pulse ox meters to check your oxygen saturation in your blood, but those things aren't always that accurate. But the thing with altitude sickness and elevation and red blood cells and stuff, it's something you can pretty much tell. If you're feeling good, as you climb higher, then chances are you're acclimatizing well. If you have tremendous headaches, you're drinking a lot of water, nothing seems to be helping, or you have this horrible kind of watery cough, then things are wrong, and what you have to do is descend immediately. And that's the thing is it's if you're not acclimatizing well, the best thing to do is to go down. So it's not like you have to go, get surgery or anything like that. It's a pretty quick fix. I mean, sometimes it can be very bad and deteriorate really quickly, but the solution is always the same: go down. So feeling right and knowing whether you're acclimatized or not tends to come with the time that you spend there, and kind of analyzing your performance. You'll notice that when you first get to base camp that first day, you can barely bring your backpack to your tent, but after a few weeks of going up and down, you can run around base camp, and that's pretty impressive considering it's 17,000 feet, right? So
wow. Explain what base camp is, because I mean, if you're stuck there for a month, is there anything to do? Or are people tossing a football? I mean, besides going up and down the mountain to acclimatize yourself, is there good games of poker going on? Is there television to watch? What's it like down there?
Yeah, so I think base camp is fun. I really like the mountain life. In your tent, you want to have things that you can kind of keep yourself entertained with. Some people bring iPads, chock full with movies. You just bring a bunch of books, your Kindle, some crossword puzzles, cards, whatever, your iPhone, if you have games on it, whatever, or conversation with other people. On other days, because that can get kind of boring. Some companies actually have TVs that they have ported in that play movies or projectors. There is Wi-Fi that you can pay for that's kind of in the valley, so you can get internet. It's not super cheap, but it's doable. And then there are small little treks you can do around some other base camps or some smaller peaks you can go hike up, or monasteries, or little villages with tea houses that you can go and get a snack or something. So there's a lot to do. I wouldn't say you throw around a football because there's a lot of rocks and stuff. Actually, on the north side, though, it is a bit flatter at base camp. So I think one year we made like a soccer ball out of a bunch of tape, and we were playing with that. Or we played like petanque, with some rocks and stuff. You get creative. It's like when you're a kid and you have to go in the backyard and entertain yourself, you can figure it out.
Yeah, no kidding. I do have to ask, we got about 6 minutes here before we got to go to our first break. I do have to ask, because this is a paranormal show, when you're down in base camp or starting to move up and you're talking with the Sherpas, you're talking with people who have been there a long time, what's the talk about Yeti?
Yeti. I haven't heard too much about that. You do hear some kind of meanderings and little vague stories about people having seen these things, but I've never really met anyone or heard of anyone recently, or someone that I know immediately who has claimed to have seen it, or have met someone who has claimed to have seen it. But there is a Yeti skull or scalp that is kind of on show in one of the tea houses, in one of the monasteries, in one of the villages up in the Everest Valley, which I think it was found by Hillary when he went back in the 60s looking for evidence of a Yeti. And he didn't find it like in the ground or the actual Yeti remains, but he found it in one of the locals' village house or something, and he promoted it for it to be put on display. But there's still debate about whether it's real or not. I think Reinhold Messner, who's another famous climber, claims to have seen a Yeti when he was in Tibet in the 80s. But then I think there's also the counter argument that he eventually went to a zoo in China and saw that, the thing he thought he saw as a Yeti was actually some kind of bear species that he didn't recognize. So I don't know. And I think there's been footprints maybe found or taken photos of in the 50s. That's all I know. I've never come into contact or any real life stories.
What about strange paranormal events? Because there is so much death on that mountain. I think in total over 375 people have died at various areas of Mount Everest from base camp on up. You know, there's got to be some good ghost stories from around there or legends that you heard.
Yeah, you know, one of our guides, I remember he had a crazy ghost story, but unfortunately I don't remember it. But I know that what mountain was he was on where he felt. I remember there was some mountain he was on. It wasn't Everest. It was another one of these 8,000 meter peaks, and they were at one of these camps, and I think it was like one of the camps where someone, a climber many years ago, had walked off thinking that, you know, maybe they're going to the bathroom and they fell off because it was the edge of the cliff there. And that he thought he had seen something. I don't know. I don't know the details. I don't want to say something that's not true, but, you know, I will say this, that yes, the mountain is littered with bodies of people who have passed away, and it's very eerie because at that altitude, these bodies don't decompose very quickly. So when you see them or when you come across one, they are in eerily good shape. I mean, still with some skin on their faces that's exposed. A lot of them are covered or still wearing a lot of their gear. But they're there in plain sight. And some years, I mean, they're covered in a lot of snow, depending on how much snow has come that season. But sometimes they're just right there and in the middle of the path that you have to climb, and you have to just step over them. I'll never forget this one Sherpa had passed away a day before we kind of came over him. This was on the north side. And the rope, so the whole mountain is lined with a rope. It's put in every year by the Sherpas to delineate the route. And this year, or that year, there was a Sherpa that died right on the rope. And, you know, I remember having to walk over him, and he was just laying there, face up. And I make a joke of it, but it's not funny, but it's the only way I can describe it is, it looked like, you know, the movie Weekend at Bernie's, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right? He had these glasses on. He's just laying there. And, you know, it looked like just a guy playing a joke. He was so lifelike. And, I mean, he was freshly deceased. But, you know, it's just coming across that as you're doing this activity is a very weird feeling.
We're going to get more into that in hour number 2 here. We're going to step out for a break right now, Nelson, because I don't want to give anything more away, because I think this gets to some important parts of what I wanted to ask you and our audience wanted to ask you tonight. We may get some questions from our chat rooms as well for you. Nelson Dellis is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I highly suggest go to his YouTube channel. He's an incredible vlogger. Nelson Dellis, that's DELLIS. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. And I believe it's nelsondellis.com is the website. He's a memory champion. He has tried climbing Everest 3 times. Hasn't made it to the peak in the summit yet. Will there be a 4th? We'll find out with more on Spaced Out Radio right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want.
That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything is an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thanks for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, our Keith Andrews is back. I know the Twitter crowd is going to love that. With another edition of the ET Connection, we welcome your participation. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and the Deep Talk Radio Network. And don't forget, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Dontopodology. Dontopodology is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking about near death on Mount Everest. It's a topic that we've always wanted to do on this show, and finally we're getting the opportunity to do so. Joining us tonight is 4-time United States memory champion Nelson Dellis. NelsonDellis.com is his website. You can also type in Nelson Dellis on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on his channel. He's an incredible vlogger. He's tried for the summit of Mount Everest 3 times, and the stories he has about it are absolutely incredible. Nelson, welcome back.
Thanks again for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And you know, I was telling Nelson during the break, I got messaged privately on Facebook and otherwise by a number of our listeners already tuning in, how they're saying that they're sitting at the edge of their seats just listening to you, Nelson. So you're having a very captivating night with our audience, and I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Now, I want to get into the bodies of Mount Everest because over 375 people have died up there, and you were giving just a horrific story right before the break about how you had to step over a dead Sherpa who had passed away the day before as you were making your climb up. When you are looking around Mount Everest, for those of us who will never get the opportunity to be there, how visible are these bodies? And are they absolutely scattered everywhere, or are you seeing one just every now and again that becomes almost like a landmark?
Yeah, I mean, I say littered, and people say littered around the mountain just because, you know, how often in your area around you are there dead bodies? I mean, visible dead bodies, right? Probably not that many. So I guess for the area that you're in, there's a lot. But that being said, I mean, the mountain is clean and is snow and rock, the majority, right? It's not like everywhere you look, you're seeing dead bodies, not even close. Most of the time, you're not going to see anything like that. But the higher you go, right, is where a lot of the historically bad incidents have happened, and some of those bodies haven't been retrieved, or it's too difficult to retrieve, so they just stay there. And like I said before, sometimes on a dry season, there's no snow, and then you can see more of those remains. But on snowy seasons, for example, you may miss some of the quote unquote common kind of fixtures on the mountain that are bodies. For example, Scott Fisher and Rob Hall, if you've seen the movie Everest or read Into Thin Air, those are the two guides that perished up there in '96 in one of those worst seasons. And their bodies, from what I heard, are you can see them on the way up to the summit at the end there, but I never saw them. Either I missed them or it was snow was covering them. But you mentioned Green Boots. He's on the north side. When you're going for the summit, you get on the ridge there, and there's kind of like a big rock that kind of has a cove at the bottom of it. And, again, depending on how much snow is there, you can see a lot of him or just his green boots sticking out. And I've passed by him. He, for example, I mean, it's sad that it's this way, but, on a mountain that's mostly rock, it's hard to sometimes know where you are, and so something like a green pair of boots is a marker that you can kind of use as a definition to know where you are in terms of distance to the summit.
There has been a lot of debate coming out in 2018 about the amount of bodies that are now on the mountain and whether or not there should be a recovery effort to grab them and bring them home, to repatriate them to their own countries, because literally there are climbers dead from almost every major country in the world up there. What is your thoughts on the repatriation of these bodies, or do you think that they should remain up there? Because there seems to be a big debate in the mountaineering community about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't think they should be retrieved. That's a personal opinion of mine. For one, because the people that are going to do it are the Sherpas. Why? Because it's so high up there, you're going to need the help of numerous people, and those people have to be strong, good climbers. You think of getting to the summit on your own with just a small pack on your back with oxygen, how hard that is. Imagine having to carry a body down and not get yourself in a situation, right? That's really tough. So the Sherpas are the ones who are going to do this. And again, this is my personal opinion. Why should they be the ones to bring people down who, listen, this sport is a very selfish endeavor. I'd be the first to admit that. A lot of the people that want to climb this, they're paying a lot of money. They're doing this out of their own desire. And it's maybe not the right thing to say, but if they end up on the mountain like that, that's kind of what you got to accept. And I don't think it's fair to risk a bunch of other people's lives to get their dead bodies down.
If you died up there, would you want your body to stay up there?
Yeah. And I don't know about other climbers, but for me, if that's where I end, I'd like to stay there. For one, I don't want to trouble anybody, but secondly, I'm dying what I love doing, and I want to be part of that mountain. My wife probably would think otherwise, but I wouldn't want to come down. But again, I don't care to be buried or anything like that.
That's a pretty surreal answer, man. That is a pretty surreal answer that you even have to think about that, because
you're right.
But that's the reality of it up there.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm kind of stepping out of my body right now as you ask me these questions. The fact that we're having this conversation and I can answer these questions without really, thinking that they're all too shocking is again another way that I field or guard myself, I guess, from the reality that this is pretty dangerous.
When you look at it and the amount of bodies up there, I realize every sport has a code. Okay, I mean, back in my hockey days, you had to obey by the code. Otherwise, you had to drop the gloves and go. I mean, that's just the way it is. Every sport has a code. Is the code not to bring the bodies down out of just pride, out of danger? What would be the cause for not trying to rescue somebody who is near imminent death?
Yeah, it's a tough. Well, I mean, okay, if we're talking about dead bodies, I've seen, for example, a guy that I'm good friends with. His best climbing partner passed away on Annapurna, which is another 8,000 meter peak, which is really dangerous. And he went out with one of his good friends who's a really talented helicopter pilot, and they looked for the body. They were going to fetch the body. And that I appreciate because he wanted to do that. He wasn't, asking any Sherpa to do it. He's a very strong climber and probably capable if they did find it. So that I get, right? And he wanted, closure with that. But another thing is again, asking these Sherpas. One thing I didn't mention is that for the Sherpas, this mountain is sacred. The gods look over this mountain, and if you touch dead bodies or you mess with that kind of goes against. They think that they're angering the gods. So actually, for a lot of these Sherpas, if they're asked to do this, will refuse because it's kind of against their beliefs.
I get that and I understand that, but let's say you have a hiker who is frostbitten in the death zone. Let's go to the death zone for a second, and that's right near Hillary's Peak, I believe, right? And in that area, if you start struggling, whether it's for oxygen or frostbite or something like that, are you toast? Like, are you done, or can they get you down?
No, yeah. Okay. So I see. So now we're talking about if you're still alive. Yes, they can get you down. It's very difficult, and it depends where you are on the mountain. If you're in the death zone, you need to do a lot on your own. Otherwise, you're going to need almost a village of Sherpas to carry you down. It has been done, and they do it. And of course, look, I'm not. Again, they're selfish people on the mountain, but they're not. They do care about other people, and they do help. And a lot of people are very helpful and do some very heroic things to save people alive. So yeah, I mean, they will make rescue efforts. For one, this is a great example. The last time I was there, 2016, we were at the high camp at the South Col, which is in the death zone. I went down because I was sick with my guide who wanted to look over me, and the rest of our team was up there. They went for the summit that night, and one of the climbers got to the summit, but on the way down got extremely sick. He got pulmonary edema that just hit him immediately, and suddenly he collapsed and had to be helped down to the camp there, Camp 4, which is still in the death zone. So he was sitting in his tent, and if you have pulmonary edema and you're in the death zone, that is not a good situation. And me and my guide were already back down at base camp at that point, communicating over sat phone with the people who were up there with him. And we were basically saying, okay, he's a goner. He's not going to last the night. What are they going to do? There's no way he can't get up. He's collapsed. He can't. He's delirious. What are you going to do? And our guy tried every scenario in his head. Could they get a helicopter up to Camp 3, which is slightly lower than Camp 4, and do a long line rescue, which is where you basically, below the helicopter, you have a long wire that connects to a person in a harness, and you're basically flying the helicopter with the body dangling, right? Because you can't touch down there. So you have to somehow just hook someone in and just fly off. Super risky. But the person would have had to descend quite a bit under his own effort, which would have been impossible. So, but ultimately, the people up at the Camp 4 had certain drugs that could help him kind of get a kick of energy, and he did manage to walk down a little bit of a ways with the help of a few Sherpas and the rest of the team, which was very dangerous, but people cared about this guy, wanted to save him, and he got down to Camp 2 where a helicopter was able to land and actually evacuate him. But you hear lots of stories like that all the time. A lot of the stories that are sensationalized by the news are the ones where you hear like, there was a guy at the Hillary Step or at the South Summit, and he was walked by over 100 people who didn't help him, and sure, maybe to some extent that's true. It's so hard to justify or explain or know the real truth about those situations, because who knows, maybe that climber pushed when he wasn't supposed to, and maybe he was at a point where people thought he was dead, and maybe the people who passed him were on their doorstep too. And you have to make these decisions that are just so, at sea level, really ethically difficult. But up there, you're trying to think one thing. The oxygen is making you drowsy, and you can't really do decision making very well. So it's all these things that just make it really hard to decide what's right and wrong. It's tough.
You were talking about David Sharp there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, David Sharp. Yeah,
so
2006.
Just so our audience knows, he was attempting to summit Everest on his own and had stopped to rest at the Green Boots Cave, as many have before him and after. And apparently at least 40 people walked by him and nobody stopped to help him. And that's the alleged rumor that Nelson was just telling us about. I got a lot of people asking about Green Boots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what we know, he's never formally been identified, and yet he is probably the most famous landmark right there. Explain to our people who Green Boots is, what you've been able to find out, and how eerie it is to kind of have to walk by him. Like he's right there on the trail.
Yeah. So, I don't know a ton about him. I think he's an Indian climber, and he died, I think, in the 96 season. And it's the north side, like I said before. But I don't know the details around his death or who he was climbing with. And I don't know if people know that information or not. Unfortunately, so sorry I can't give more information, but
that's okay.
It is weird because you walk over him and it's just surreal because it's that green color is just so vibrant in a place that's so devoid of color. You're just in a mountain that's snow and rock, and suddenly there's this green, like neon 80s green, boot with some red and blue I think his pants are blue, his jacket's a bit red, and he's kind of curled over on his side, huddled under this cove, which I don't know the details, but it looks like he went under there for a bit of shelter, and that was probably where he met his end.
Is it weird to know that you're actually using a human body as a landmark on the way up? Like, how do you not sit there and just stare at him and think, wow, not only am I looking at a legendary landmark, but that used to be a living, breathing human being?
Yeah. Again, though, when you're there doing that, I don't know if it's just a natural survival instinct. You don't think that way when it's in front of you. Sure, afterwards, now, I think about it, and it is definitely a bit messed up, a bit bizarre, very bizarre. But when you're there, you don't have time to process all that, or maybe you're in shock a little bit. You just kind of say, okay, there's a pair of boots. I'm going to pass it. I know that I've just passed green boots, and I'm not going to be green boots, and then that's the end of it.
It sounds so cold and callous, but in reality, you have to keep your focus. Otherwise, that could be you.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to do? You're break down right there, and start to contemplate life and death and shed a tear. It's not the time. If that's what you're going to do, then you shouldn't be on the mountain.
Wayward question time here for you, Nelson. You've been up pretty high. Let's teach the flat earthers a little bit of a lesson here. Did you see the curvature of the earth while you were up there?
Yes. I talk about that all the time. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. You can see until so far into the distance, and it's a curve. It's a curve. Oh man. Do you have flat earthers listening to the show?
We do have flat earthers who tune on in, and there's one in our chat room right now, and he's actually put, it's a flat earth law in here, but we have to try and, round them out a little bit. Round them up,
No pun intended.
No, but let's, before we get too deep into going there, what's it like viewing the earth from a mountain that up high where you could just see the curvature of the earth?
Yeah, you definitely feel like you're in this. When you stop to think about it, you realize where you are, and it's a very humbling experience, but you feel very, very alone and far away from anything and everything. And in that way, it can kind of be very scary. But it's beautiful at the same time too. Especially in the Himalayas, you're just seeing these incredible, like, ferocious peaks just like cutting through the air for hundreds and hundreds of miles in all directions. And it's just stunning because the other thing is you realize that this is like the oldest pieces of rock on the planet, right? I don't know if that's true, but some of the oldest, right? I guess if it has to have come that high. I remember I pulled a rock off that I fashioned into a necklace for my wife, and that rock from the Summit Triangle, is half a billion years old, right? And you're standing on it, right? And that rock used to be, at sea level, I guess, at some point, millions of years ago. But anyways, it's a fascinating thing to witness, and you feel like, you're in the sky. It's indescribable.
You almost feel like you can fly.
Yeah, that you're flying above the earth for sure.
No kidding. I want to get into the Sherpas here because, these are your lifesavers. These are almost like your living guardian angels while you're up there. And I once read that these Sherpas, they come from small little towns, and, being a Sherpa from their community or their village is the equivalent of, say, one of our locals becoming a professional athlete in the NFL or a movie star or a rock star. That's pretty much the equivalent of this. They take a lot of pride in this, and they don't get paid a lot of money, do they?
Well, it's all relative. The cost of things. They actually get paid very well, according to the compared to the living standard there. But they. Yeah, to be a Sherpa is an honor, and a very high title to own. Especially if you're climbing and being a Sherpa on Everest, it's the top. In that region, that is like the best job you can have. A lot of these Sherpas, they have tea houses that they've been able to build and lodges that they run, from the money that they've earned, and rightly so. They're putting their lives at risk for, the Westerners that want to, fulfill their dreams, right? And often these guys, I talk about how hard it is for me or for climbers. We have to go up and down the mountain. Well, whatever we do, these Sherpas have to do 3 or 4 times as much, because they're carrying all the fuel, all the ropes, all the tents, and food and whatever, up to these camps before we get there. And sometimes, they have to dig out the camps, right? Maybe there was a dump of snow and they have to set it up or level it out. They have to put out the tents. They have to cook stuff and get it ready for us when we get there. It's hard work, right? I mean, remember, this is at altitude. So everything that you're doing, if you're digging snow, that is digging snow at, 20,000 feet, 25,000 feet. That's hard. So these guys are unbelievable workhorses, and so nice and friendly and caring. It's incredible. I mean, they just will do anything. They'll bend over backwards for you, just because they're such beautiful people.
Well, that's beautiful, and it's going to give you some comfort when you're up there in knowing that this complete stranger has literally your best interest and your safety and life in their hands, and they're not taking advantage of that.
Yeah, it's very comforting. I mean, some of these companies who charge a little more will charge more because they have more Western guides. By Western, I mean typically American or British or not local guides. But I never understand that. I would rather pay more for a Sherpa than a Western guide. Just because they're stronger, they can tolerate the cold and altitude better than we can. So I would prefer to have a Sherpa around me than anybody else.
There's also a big controversy around Mount Everest regarding the amount of garbage and things like fecal matter around there. Is the media blowing that out of proportion, or does it really need a cleanup, a hiatus of trying to reach the mountain and a personal ego to look at the environmental part of it?
Yeah, I think it's been hyped up a bit. One of the guys, a climber that I've climbed with before, covers the Everest season every year, and the consensus this year was that the mountain has never been cleaner. Which is great. Obviously, you're going to have some wear and tear higher up, especially in the higher camps where it's just impossible to take things out there. And it's such a desolate landscape that, stuff just doesn't disappear. But there are initiatives by the Nepalese government, and I would assume the Chinese government, where you have to pack in a certain amount of garbage on your way out. Otherwise, you don't get the permit or you can't climb it. So they know that it's a beautiful piece of land that needs to be taken care of. And I remember the times that I've been there, people always said it's a huge garbage dump. Everest is a garbage dump, and it's not. Sure, there's a bit of garbage here and there, but it's actually pretty darn clean. Again, except for some things like some oxygen bottles that you might find higher up, or some tents that have ripped apart over the years and were maybe partially buried with snow. I mean, what are you going to do? So yeah, it's definitely not as bad as the media makes it out to be.
Did you study a lot about Sir Edmund Hillary? Because, I mean, and this leads into John's question in the chat room for you, who is asking, there's rumors that one of Hillary's Sherpas made it to the summit first, but didn't get credit because he wasn't the rich white guy.
Yeah. So from what I understand, they were climbing together. I think, listen, all these professional climbers realize that the Sherpas are the ones that make it happen. And I think the way it goes, I always forget, with my great memory and everything, but Tenzing Norgay was the Sherpa that was climbing with Hillary when they were close to the summit, was ahead. And out of the goodness of, again, these Sherpas are so selfless, he let Hillary go ahead of him to be the first on the summit.
They are that selfless.
Yeah.
Wow. We could use more of that around North America, don't you think?
Yeah.
There's my political statement for the day. But nonetheless, I want to start focusing on you here. You know, we talked in hour number 1 that you decided that this was something you have had to do. And the first time you went up was in 2011. Take us through that, because you nearly died on this quest. You nearly were one of the statistical numbers on Mount Everest.
Yeah, that was probably the closest I'd been to the summit, and the closest I probably was to death. I was 27. Yeah, 27. So I was young. This was my first massive peak like this, a 2-month expedition. I hadn't done anything that long. But I was excited. I was young, energetic. I thought I could do anything. I felt good. I felt very strong most of the expedition, most of the climb. I was, always kind of one of the first and the quickest of our team to get to each camp as we went up and down. And then on summit day, so what happens is, you get to this is on the south side. You get to Camp 4, also known as the South Call, which is just at the death zone. The death zone, they describe it being 8,000 meters or above, or 26,000 feet or above, roughly around there. And so you're there. You set up camp for a little bit, and basically once you get there, you're basically going for the summit that night. So you don't really get to sleep up there, and that's typically the way it should be, because you don't want to be sleeping in the death zone. It's your body's deteriorating, so it's not good for your energy. You're just going to dissipate. You got to descend if you're not going to do anything. So you get there, you kind of rest in your tent for a little bit. You try to doze away, sleep a little bit, get some energy, and then you go at night. The reason you go at night is because you want to hopefully get to the summit by sunrise. That way, when you're at the summit, you have a good amount of time to get back down to safety before weather typically comes in. Not to say that it will, but usually in the morning it's clear, so you're good to go until the clouds will roll in and disaster could ensue. Who knows? So we left for the summit. It was about 9 p.m. Actually, 8 p.m. Sorry. I remember it was just sunset. I could see the sun glow as it set it in the distance, and we were packing up to go up. So we started going, felt good. We got 4 hours later to a point called the balcony, which is kind of a outcrop, kind of on a where it meets a ridge that goes up, and that's kind of the first stop where you switch oxygen bottles. So at this point, you're using supplemental oxygen. Some climbers who are insanely strong and talented will climb without oxygen, but that wasn't me. And so we switched oxygen bottles with the help of my Sherpa, and I got some water. We were taking a break, so I take my mask off, drink some water, have a couple bites of a frozen Twix bar, and then we got back up and went to continue. And what happened is I put my mask back on. It had frozen. So the way these masks work, it's supplemental oxygen. So it's not entirely, a gas mask of oxygen. It actually has a nozzle that allows ambient air from outside to come in as well. So it's a combination of outside air and a trickling of this oxygen from your tank. But if that nozzle is blocked from the outside, then you're going to suffocate because you're not getting a lot of oxygen through that tiny little trickle. So what happened is inside the mask, there's a lot of saliva buildup because it's warm and against my mouth and my breath, that it froze when I pulled it off my face. Rock solid. So I put it back on my face. I couldn't breathe with it on. I was panicking. It was kind of just suctioning to my face as I tried to draw a breath. And I ultimately, I tried to talk to my Sherpa about it, and he didn't really understand what was happening, but I couldn't breathe. So eventually I just kept climbing, but I took the mask off, and essentially I was just climbing without the supplemental oxygen. which is what did it in for me. And on top of that, we actually crossed another dead body. And I think all of that together, when we eventually got to the Hillary Step, I sat down. It was at another point where we're supposed to change our oxygen, and I could have gone to sleep right there. I remember sitting down and just being like, I'm good. I can just stay here. It wasn't painful or anything, you're just tired, sleepy, and you could have just gone to sleep forever. Right. But a couple of our teammates passed by and they're like, "Hey Nelson, you're almost there." I was literally 50 meters from the top. But 50 meters sounds like nothing, but in terms of upper Everest, talk, that's like another hour of trudging along. And not only up, you also got to come down, which is another, could be 6 to 8 hours depending on how strong you are. So factoring all that in, I had to make a decision, and ultimately I decided that I needed to go down right now, because who knows, right? Maybe I would have eventually had to sit down, and that would have been the last place I sat, right? So I came down. I stumbled a lot coming down. Thank God I turned at that point, and eventually I made it to safety. I got all the way down after that, and it hurt to turn around, being so close. But the mountain's always there, right? That's what they always say. And here I am to this day. I'm happy with my wife and our kid coming along, and that's really what's important, right? So the journey for me was probably more important than that summit point. Even though, I still get that calling to get to the top, but yeah.
I want to ask you about the fact that you said you sat down and you felt like you could just fall asleep forever. Were you making peace with yourself, or do you even know you were that close to death at that time?
No, you don't even, I didn't even know. I mean, yeah, it's not like I was thinking, okay, this is it. I'm just going to chill here. It just, your mind isn't even processing it like that. It's just sitting down, and I just don't know where I would have had energy to get back up. You know what I mean? If I had chosen to stay there. But I kind of had this incredible, kind of like an out of body experience where, you're sitting there and you're just kind of watching yourself sit there. And I remember, it's just such a weird memory, but I remember an instance of me eating dinner with my family at this restaurant where they had like really crispy, delicious chicken tenders. And all I could do at that point was like taste them and feel like what it was like to be happy with my friends and family at the time. And that was the only thing that like got me back up, as lame as that is. But it was just like that out of body kind of like watching me sit there and then kind of having this memory overlapped of that and wanting to be back home and, stay alive. And that's kind of what made me decide to just like, yep, gotta go. Let's go.
Is your body shutting down while you're taking the rest? Or is it just mind over matter at that point where, like, I don't even know if I'm phrasing it properly, Nelson, because I've never been in that situation, but is your body shutting down?
Kind of, yeah. I guess it happens in different ways to different people, but in general, what will happen is, and this is why people get frostbite is your body's trying to stay warm and stay alive and to protect the core, right? So, your extremities are the first things to go, and it's trying to keep your heart and your lungs and your brain working, right? So that I don't, nothing was shutting down. Like I wasn't like falling apart, but it's just the main parts of your your body that needs to survive is just, barely hanging on. I had a friend who that same night went for the summit, and she turned around, but she passed out, fixed the rope, and completely like soiled herself, like everything, like, so in her situation was worse, right? That she just kind of shut down in that way, and had to be helped down. But I guess I had some of my strength still to be able to carry myself down under my own strength.
My goodness, and there's no time for, and I don't mean to make fun of your friend who soiled herself, but, there's no time to make fun or laugh about that, because literally her body is shutting down and flushing out. She is that close to death.
Yeah. And it's not like, she just had an accident. No, this is one of the body's sign that it's not, it's losing control of that because it's focusing on keeping something more crucial to survival, to keep her alive, right? Yeah.
Unbelievable. So you went back again, I believe, in 2013 to give this a try.
Yep, I went back, and this time I decided to go to the north side. The rationale behind that was, I had made it up 95% of the mountain, maybe more. I wanted to do something that was brand new. Right. It was going to be hard for me mentally to think, okay, I have to do all of that painful stuff again just to get that last little 50 meters. I might as well do something totally brand new. I don't really know what to expect other than it's Everest, and that'll keep things interesting for me. So that's why I went back, but the other side.
And how much different was it for you in 2013 compared to 2011? I mean, here you have this near-death experience in 2011. How do you find the courage in yourself to go back?
Yeah, I mean, you come back from a climb like in 2011 and you say, like, wow, I was very close. I don't know if I could have done it. I'm glad I turned around. I'm done, right? And then, time sets in and you think, you know what? What if maybe I was wrong. Maybe I misinterpreted some of that. Maybe I could have given a little more. Maybe my preparation was different. Maybe I should have been eating more meat or working out differently or preparing with different gear, lighter gear. I don't know. Maybe you think the other side, maybe because like I said, the route's different. Like the summit day isn't as steep, but it's more horizontally long that you have to climb. So maybe that's better for my type of physique and physiology, right? I don't know. But I know I'm close. I know I'm strong. I know I'm mentally strong. I know I can do it. So that's what would go into that thought process. And then before I know it, I said I'd never do it again. I'm booking a trip. So
how do you get the money for this? I mean, this has to be what, a $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 trip?
So the price for an Everest trip can vary. The minimum with very minimal support is about $20,000. And it used to be a big discrepancy between sides. The north side used to be a lot cheaper, but now it's kind of on par. The Chinese government has kind of raised the prices there with the permits, so it's almost the same. But if you want something kind of comfortable, I'd say you're going to look at between 35 and 50,000. Some companies, will go up to $100,000 though. What are you paying for that? Like I said, more Western guides, better amenities. Although at some point, you are in the middle of nowhere. It can't get that much better, but some have these beautiful domes that have like pool tables and this is a base camp, and ping pong tables and big screen TVs and stuff like that. You don't need that crap. But some offer that, right? You have some clients that want something nice for 2 months, which whatever. And then some these days, they're trying these flash Everest expeditions where they have you pre-acclimatize at home in a hyperbaric chamber?
Yeah.
Yeah, it simulates like high altitude while you sleep. And supposedly it works. I don't know. I mean, these companies claim success. I think it's still relatively new to say that it works for sure, but it looks promising. And they do these trips in like 4 to 6 weeks, which is crazy. And those trips are even more expensive, like $120,000. I've seen one at.
My goodness.
Yeah. So how do I raise the money? So what I paid for my trips were, I think the first time it was 37, the second was 40, and then the third was 42. Jesus. If I had all that money still, I'd have a house or something, you know? But you know, look, I have a decent job, but it's nothing crazy to write home about, but I save up a lot. I was able to get some sponsorships. I wrote a lot of letters to companies to take, you know, their flag up to the summit, or, you know, wear their patch or do some vlogs or do some kind of partnership. Creative ways to try to find ways to foot the bill. And, you know, there were times where I had booked the trip and there was a month to go and I didn't have all the money. But, you know, when there's a will, there's a way. And that's kind of what's always been my thing is, you know, where's the money going to come from? I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out somewhere or the other. And I did. Yeah.
You've climbed Kilimanjaro, Matterhorn, some very famous peaks.
Mm-hmm.
What is the biggest difference between Everest and, say, the Matterhorn? And we're not talking about the one at Disneyland here. We're talking the real mountain, or Mount Kilimanjaro, which seems to be ever popular these days as well. What's the biggest difference?
Yeah, well, okay, so the Matterhorn, you do it in a day. But the Matterhorn is a lot steeper, and you could argue technically more difficult than Everest. Technically, you know, there's a lot more rope skills you got to have. You just got to know how to climb better. Everest, you know, you could get away with not knowing really how to quote unquote climb, because it's essentially a high altitude hike. Sure, there are parts where you actually have to do some scrambles or go up, you know, icy sections with a rope or across ladders and stuff like that, or rappelling down stuff. But for the most part, it's just the walk. The hard part about Everest, what makes it Everest, is the altitude and the fact that you're in the most challenging environment in the planet, you know, at that height. So yeah, Kilimanjaro, it's a great challenge. You know, I think that's one of these peaks that any of your listeners could do if they put their mind to it. But that's just a hike. There's not really much, you're kind of on a glacier at the end, but there's really no snow. You don't need crampons or ropes or anything like that. So a lot of those climbs are just, you know, those are also high altitude hikes, I guess, but Everest is extreme altitude. I guess that's what really sets it apart.
We got about 5 minutes here before we got to go to our final break of the night, and you'll be with us until the bottom of the hour before we get to the encounter online. On time number 3, you had tried it from the north, you had tried it from the south, you were unsuccessful. Time number 3, as we get into this, and we'll take it past the hour here. Did you think that, you know, in the back of your mind, knowing that, and I don't want to use the word failed because I think that's a disgusting word to use at this time, but that you didn't accomplish what you wanted to as of yet, when you went back for third time's a charm, what was that like? What was going through your mind after not being able to summit on trips 1 and 2?
Oh man. Yeah. After the first one, you know, it was like, devastated. I was right there, all this effort, all this time, money, and here I am, no summit, you know. But then I came to grips with it. It was about the journey, blah, blah, blah. I was happy with my decision and everything. And I knew I could go back. I went back. And then I remember when I turned around at that time, I felt more at ease with my decision because, you know, from the first time, I thought it was the end of the world that I turned around. I didn't know how I was going to get back there, and I did. So in my head, that second time, same thing. I was like, okay, now's not the time. I prioritize my safety and my health. I'll come back another time. And I did. It took a little longer to get back, 3 years after. But sure, there's a bit of pressure there. And, after spending all that time and money and putting my family and friends through that for a third time, it's kind of like, okay, Nelson, here you go. This is it, right? Not to say that after this I'm never going to climb again, but, maybe I can kind of pull back on these extreme expeditions, especially on Everest. So there was a bit of pressure, and I don't know. It was a tough season. I don't know what was wrong with me. I don't know if it was being too confident because I had been there already, or kind of having my foot in and foot out at the same time, because I was back on the south side and I had already done it before, and I don't know. It just wasn't my best effort, which is unfortunate because I knew going into it I wanted to give my best effort. So I don't know, and I got sick. So I got to the South Col again, which is at 8,000 meters, and I developed early signs of pulmonary edema. I was coughing up some of my lung and some blood, actually, which is a huge warning sign. So I went down immediately. Yeah. So I often think about why I can't get to the top, or why I haven't, but I still believe I can.
We're going to get more into that one in hour number, or in the third hour here, we're about 2.5 minutes away from the break. I did forget to ask you, and I apologize because I was so excited to talk about number 3 as well. In number 2, what caused you from not making it to the top that time?
Oh, yeah. So the north side is notorious for being extremely cold and windy. The weather's a lot more unforgiving. So when we actually got to Green Boots, you're kind of just hitting the ridge there. And that's when the wind was just so strong. And I'm really bad with cold, I guess, because I'm super tall. My blood circulation probably isn't that great. So my fingers and toes just turn into ice blocks if I'm not careful. And for whatever reason, I tried my best to manage my heat and to keep it in my fingers and toes, and it just vanished. And so I was climbing with these blocks. And I looked ahead, and there was this feature called the First Step, a famous feature on the mountain. And there was just a line of people. And I knew that if I got stuck in that line, I was going to probably lose some fingers or toes at the speed I was going. And so I decided that I didn't want to do that. So I turned around.
You have this incredible brake mechanism in yourself that allows you to realize these signs. And I want to start off the next hour, because we're about to go to break here, but I want to start off the next hour about ego. How the hell are you keeping your ego in check with this to stay alive, where so many others look at the goal and say, oh, a finger or a toe or a nose aren't as important as getting to the summit? I'm actually quite impressed with that, Nelson. Very impressed that you have your wits about you to think about that, fingers and toes and body parts are actually quite important.
Yeah, I think so. But I often worry that maybe that overcautiousness is what's being the thing that's preventing me, I fight with that thought a lot. So, but yeah, we could talk about it in the next hour. I have a few more thoughts about that.
Absolutely. Nelson Dellis is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He's going to be with us for another half an hour here on the show before we get to Everett Themer and the Encounter Online in our daily news section here called The Encounter. We're talking Mount Everest, what it's like to climb, what it's like to almost die on the world's highest peak. We got more with Nelson Dellis. I do want to give you his website. It is nelsondellis.com. That's DELLIS. And do us a favor. If you've subscribed to the Spaced Out Radio YouTube channel, do the same thing for Nelson. He's a great vlogger. You'll love his vlogs. He's got a ton of videos on there as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more after this. Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the show, we talk extraterrestrials. Our Keith Andrews will be back with the ET Connection. It happens the first Friday of every month. Your participation is welcomed as well. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio Network. Don't forget, if you're looking for our archives, they are free. Yes, free. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Dontopodology. Dontopodology is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. For the final time tonight, we introduce Nelson Dellis. He is a gentleman who is probably one of the most humble interviews we have ever given and had on this show. He has tried to climb Mount Everest 3 times, never hit the summit in 3 times, but the legends, the lore, the attitude, it's an experience that if you're just joining us late on this show, go to our archives, listen to this one. This is the one you are going to want to listen to maybe a couple times over, because there's so much packed information. Nelson's website is nelsondellis.com, and his YouTube channel, Nelson Dellis. Dellis is spelled Dellis. So I highly suggest you check it on out. Give his YouTube channel a subscribe and a like as well. I'd appreciate it. Nelson, once again, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story on Spaced Out Radio tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to share. I love having the time to share this stuff. I don't get it too often.
Well, we appreciate it. Right before the break, my friend, we were talking about ego. You seem to have your ego in check. You have known 3 times that you weren't going to do it. Your body was telling you no, and you've turned around. You still have all your fingers, your wits about you, your toes are there, you still have a nose on your face, and there are a lot of people who don't. And these are people who survived, but the accomplishment was worth more than the digits on their feet or their hands. You know, how have you been able to keep in check with your own personal ego? And does it affect what you're doing in the future?
Yeah. I mean, so having tried this 3 times, and other mountains that I've succeeded on or not succeeded on, I've had to figure out or think about why didn't I get to the summit? Was it something simple like weather related, or the route wasn't safe or whatever? Those are easy. But in cases like Everest where, maybe I could have pushed, maybe it was, maybe I did have blocks for hands and feet, but maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. I don't know. There's always these questions, or maybe I wasn't as, tired or as close to death as I may have perceived at the time. Who knows? But I always seem to have a point where I know that it's time to turn around, which, you point out is a good thing to have. And yeah, of course, because here I am and I'm absolutely fine. But it's something that kind of nags at me, because I wonder if maybe I'm too cautious, right? And that's kind of what has been the thing that has not gotten me to the summit. And I worry that I have to be a little more reckless to be an Everest summiteer, right? Because not everybody has to be that way. You can climb this mountain in perfect conditions, and everything goes right. But most of the time it's not so perfect. There's wind and it's cold, or there's a lot of people, traffic, whatever. So, I hope that's not the case, but I wonder if there's something I have to kind of push past in order to get on top of this thing. And, I see people around me who are so reckless that summit, they lose a finger, no big deal. They summited Everest, right? Again, going back to that first hour, we talked about my friend who was on our team that had to be rescued. We got to the South Col. This was in 2016, and we both had the same symptoms. I was hacking up a lung. I had early pulmonary edema. So did he. But the difference was he didn't say anything. You could hear him hacking a lung, but I was the one that said, I have something wrong with me. I'm going to go down. He didn't. He went to the summit. Fine. He summited. That's great. And he always will have that summit. But he collapsed on the way down and put a ton of people's lives in jeopardy. And, he could have died. He was right there. Is that worth it? I don't think so. So maybe it's a matter of what I've set out in terms of what I think is important or not. I'm not I'm an amateur mountaineer, right? I love it. I don't do it all the time. I live in Miami, for Christ's sake, right? The flattest place on earth for a mountaineer to live. But I love going on my trips to climb, but I love coming back, right? So I guess it's that balance that kind of keeps me safe, because it isn't my entire life, the mountains. I love mountains to death, but it's not my entire life. And maybe for other people, it is their whole life. And so they have to get that summit,
And I can see where the ego comes into play. I think with everything, when you're that close, you have to give it all you have. Do you think that maybe it's, we talk a lot about spirituality on this show. I don't know if you're a religious person or a spiritual person, but is it that little voice in your head that's saying, we can't do this right now? This isn't good. We're not going to come back. Is that what it is? Because we have talked so many times on this show with other people who say that little voice has saved their life so many times.
Yeah, it must be. I'm not religious or spiritual. Well, maybe you can call it some form of spirituality, but it's just me and me, right? That's how I see things. And so, yeah, if there is something in my head, it's my voice. Yeah. And I mentioned, that one time where the first time I turned around, I was kind of outside of my body, just kind of reminiscing about some things that I was missing and kind of having this conversation with myself. And yeah, it is weird when you say it like that, because yeah, there is someone that's kind of in my head, just kind of talking it straight, and telling it how it is, even though, the real physical me there is in another place, just like out of it.
So on time number 3, when you went up, you mentioned right near the top of the hour that you actually started coughing up pieces of your lung. I mean, that has to be painful. And you also mentioned a term called pulmonary edema. For our listeners who may not know what that is, can you explain that?
Yeah, it's essentially, so when you go to high altitude, most people will experience some form of acute mountain sickness or AMS. And that's typical, like your headache, lethargy, a bit of nausea, which typically can be fixed by, just drinking more water and spending time at that altitude or going down a little bit. And eventually most people will acclimatize. But if you keep pushing that, AMS can develop into more serious things, like cerebral edema or pulmonary edema. So cerebral edema is swelling of the brain. So your brain starts to swell, and obviously it's pressing up against your limited size skull, and that can be fatal pretty quickly. And then the other one is pulmonary edema, where your lungs begin to fill with fluid, and you essentially, if that gets worse, will drown in your own lungs. So when you have this sensation to just cough, because there's this kind of like, there's liquid in your lungs and it's just kind of like crackling, you just kind of have this an unending need to clear your throat. And eventually the coughing gets so strong that you're just spewing up stuff. And eventually, that's where the pieces of my lung were coming out, and some of them were laced with traces of blood. So
that had to be heartbreaking for you, honestly.
Yeah, because we got to the summit. I was tired, but I was like, great, I'm here. I'm in position to climb this thing. We slept that night. We actually had to stay an extra night because the winds were too strong to go immediately. And in the night is when I remember I woke up and just had this fit of coughing. And I remember rolling over to spit something out into my hand. And it was like a solid chunk of tissue. It was disgusting. And I looked at it and I was like, oh no, I don't know what that is, but that's not good. And then I did another one, and that one had blood on it. And I was like, okay, that's really bad. So, I mean, I felt fine otherwise, but I know what that meant. And, like I said, it can turn really quick. Those were the early signs of pulmonary edema. So like my friend who had the same kind of cough, he went up, he was fine. And then on the way down, he collapsed, right? It was near death. So that turned on him in a second. So I knew that could happen. So that was the end of the conversation. I was going down.
If you decide to go a 4th time, and thank goodness your wife is sleeping right now and not hearing this part of the conversation, but if you didn't make that decision, do you think that's a selfish decision on your part because you're married, you will now have a family with a little boy on the way here in a couple of months, or do you think you can pull it off and go for it again, maybe in 2020, and say, okay, this time I know what I got to do different. Maybe you train differently. Maybe you use your mindset a little bit differently to go for it. How do you do things differently if you make that decision?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I mean, the one thing I can argue is that I climb safe, I think. I'm very experienced. I know my body's limits. I think that's the most important thing, especially for a climb like this. So if something is close to being wrong, I think I will make the right decision. So that's the good thing. The second thing is the selfishness thing. It's like, yes, it's such a selfish endeavor. And if I was single and had no attachments, I would be out on the mountains as much as I could. Who cares? I just want to be doing that, right? But now I have people that I have to consider, and it's tough because you want to be there for your family, and of course, not put yourself at these risky situations. But at the same time, like, I want to teach my kid that you should go for it. You know, whatever you want, you can do it if you work hard at it. And I believe I can do this. So am I just supposed to squash my dream because, you know, I have a family? I don't like that answer either, you know, because I'm not going to be happy. And, you know, I tell my wife that I just want to do Everest. That's always been my goal. Let me just finish this goal. But, you know, mountaineering is a tough drug to just squash out. But I do feel like if I can get this monkey off my back, there are a lot more reasonable mountains I could climb or even just hike, right? And this is something that eventually, when my son is old enough, we could hike together, right? Like, it doesn't have to be Everest every time, but Everest was my goal 10 years ago, and it's still my goal. So I feel like I have every right to kind of see it through if I do it the right way, right?
How do you prepare mentally for that, though, for another run, knowing, because let's face it, you know, the one thing that we all fear is failure or rejection. And, you know, you're 3 times in the rough right now, and, you know, you don't want to put that next shot in the sand trap, to use a golf analogy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the thought of saying I've failed or I've climbed Everest 4 times and haven't summited, that sounds awful. But, you know, look, there's a lot of climbers, talented climbers, that took a few climbs of Everest to get there first. A good friend of mine climbed it on his 4th time. You know, I know a few others that took them 5 or 6 times. So that's nothing to be ashamed of, I guess. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's going to be that will be hanging over my head. I have to figure out a way to kind of just not think of that.
Do you go to a psychologist?
No, but maybe
I'm
maybe
saying
I
that
should.
I'm saying that to be serious, because you know, there's a lot of athletes out there. You know, if they get in a slump at the plate in baseball or in basketball, if they can't shoot a free throw like Shaquille O'Neal, they actually went to some sort of psychological counseling in order to try and overcome, you know, the fear of having to step up to the line or the plate.
Yeah, no, that's maybe not a bad idea. Just to have someone help me manage my thoughts, because the last thing you want to do is go on this expedition, you know, feeling like you have to do this, and you know, this is the last time. You better get it. If anything, it needs to be the opposite. You know, you're just enjoying a climb, enjoying the journey, and if you get to the summit, great. Otherwise, no big deal.
Let's say you go for a 4th time and you don't make it. Do you shut it down then, or is it one trip at a time?
Yeah, I would have to say it's one trip at a time. I do know myself. I know that the dream won't die. These are tough questions. Listen, if you read my blog post about my summit day on my last one, I had this thing where I justified my whole turnaround thing, saying, you know, maybe I reached my personal Everest, which was the height that I got. Maybe there's a reason why I can't go any higher. And, you know, that 50 meters from the top was the highest I'll ever get. So I got to be happy with that. And I said that, and I really believed that for a time. And, you know, here I am again thinking like, no, I can get to the top. I know I can get to the top.
Well, I can guarantee you all of our audience will be cheering you on. I can tell you that right now, because I think you've made a very big impact on all of them. And that actually leads to one of our listeners, Trip, in the chat room. His question to you, he says, Nelson, how do you think this has changed you and others around you that make attempting these journeys? Like, how has it affected the people around you, you know, with their support, their love, or just in the dynamic of it all?
Yeah, it's a nice question. I mean, I think for me, what I've learned from all these is just that, you know, back in the day when I first climbed my first mountain, and I had a trickle of the idea of Everest, which I didn't really think was possible. And here I am, having had the opportunity to be on that amazing peak 3 times. It's like, if you really want something, you can go after it, right? No matter how insane it seems, right? Imagine any listener right now thinking that they would be on Everest in 10 years, within the next 10 years. That might seem like a crazy idea, but it's doable. I mean, I'm not a professional mountaineer. I put it together. I scrapped it together somehow, and here I am. So that has always been kind of like a really cool thing to sit back and realize that, and you can apply it to anything, and I've been able to apply it to other things in my life that, seem difficult, but you take one step at a time, like you're climbing this big mountain and you can get there. And I know a lot of my friends and people who have supported me have said things about seeing me doing this, that they've felt inspired by that. And it's kind of a cool thing to see, someone push for something really big and kind of out of reach and get very close. It's motivational,
Does age and maturity have anything to do with the success of it all? Are there more people, say, over the age? I mean, you're encroaching on 35 here.
Yeah.
Are there more people, say, 35 and older, making it because they know how to handle the situations more than, say, people in their 20s when you first tried at age 27?
Yeah, it's actually, mountaineering is an older man's sport. You'll find a lot more people, in their late 30s, 40s, even pushing in the 50s. And yeah, I think it has to do with a few things. I think older people probably have a bit more money to spend on this sport. But also, it's the experience, the patience. It is a slow, tedious sport. It's kind of boring sometimes, where you're just walking slowly, hour by hour. So to be able to kind of deal with that, and deal with the pain threshold, I think that comes with age and maturity. Yeah, for sure.
Gail wants to know in the chat room, if you decide to take a fourth attempt, are you going on the north side or the south side, and why?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to the north side. I always kind of had a soft spot for it. I don't know. It's so like wild, wild west. It feels like you're just out there, and there's fewer people, so it really feels like you have the mountain to itself. The last time I was on the south side, there were over 1,000 people at base camp, which, it's sprawled over about 1.5 miles, but it's still, you can see how much more crowded it is these years than in the past. And the north side is a bit trickier to get to just because of the politics with Tibet and China. So there's a bit fewer people. So you really feel like you have the whole mountain to yourself. And I don't know, you just feel like you're really rugged out there doing an adventure in Tibet. It's pretty cool. Compared to, not to say that Nepal isn't an adventure, but it's a little more traveled, I guess.
The mystique. And at the beginning of the show, we go right back to where we started. You feel that Mount Everest is still calling you. What does that feel like, or what are you hearing? Are you dreaming about the mountain? Explain that to us if you don't mind.
Yeah, I actually dream about it a lot. I had a dream the other night about it. I feel like when I'm on it, or I'm about to leave to it. But yeah, it calls me. I mean, I feel like I have a relationship with this mountain, and it's like a lover that I had, and she's waiting for me over there, and I miss it, That's a weird way to say it, but it's just like you get this pang inside of you sometimes when something reminds you of it. And not necessarily like the feeling of being on the mountain, on the snow, climbing, but little things like I said, that feeling of adventure on that north side, or the camaraderie that you experience on a listless day at base camp, where you guys are just, doing nothing, playing cards, enjoying the sun, or those days where you just had like a crazy climbing day and you're passed out in your tent in your sleeping bag, freezing cold, and just having a laugh with your tent mate. Those kind of moments are what I briefly think about, and I miss that. And, you kind of get all of that to the extreme on Everest.
Well, now that we're making you a fan of this show, now you're going to be all of a sudden like, are there ghosts around here? Should I be bringing ghost hunting equipment? You're going to be thinking of all this stuff. And where's Yeti? Where's that big sucker hiding?
Yeah.
Looking for the footprints while you're climatizing. Then you could give us live reports from Everest over the satellite phone. Yeah, I found some Yeti prints. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye out. You know what's crazy is, so on the south side, there's this ice fall, which is part of a feature of the mountain you got to negotiate before you get to Camp 1. And it's famous because it moves a lot, like 6 feet a day of just this crumbling ice. And so if you go to the foot of it, some people will just, on a day where you have to just rest and acclimatize, you'll explore. And you can find stuff from like the 1950s, from old expeditions that, were higher up on the mountain, like lost in a crevasse, that found their way down at the foot of the mountain. It's pretty cool. You'll find like tin cans or even bones of who knows what, people or yaks or whatever. It's pretty interesting.
That is awesome. We got about 2 minutes left with you tonight. And once again, Nelson, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your incredible experience with us. I really hope that if you decide to make a fourth run, that somehow Spaced Out Radio can be a part of it, on the before and after effects of you going. That would be just wonderful. That would be wonderful. Could you do me a favor? Because I want to make sure that you get your website and your YouTube channel and your vlogs out there.
Yeah. So my website, you said it, is nelsondellis.com. And all my channels can be connected through there. You'll find my blog, my YouTube channel, Instagram, and all that. And then, so a lot of my climbs I do for my a charity that I founded. I had mentioned at the beginning of the show that I got into memory because of my grandmother and Alzheimer's. So I climb for memory. That's the name of the charity, Climb for Memory, and raise money and awareness for Alzheimer's as well through these climbs. So if anybody wants to learn about that, you can go to climb4memory.org and learn about the charity and the efforts there.
That is awesome, my friend. And in the meantime, you got the biggest challenge lying ahead of you in just a couple of months, becoming a new dad. And, congratulations on becoming a father too, my friend. It is the most exciting times, man, because every day is different. Every day is different. I'm sure you've heard that from a number of people, but I think that'll be your toughest challenge yet. Never mind Everest.
Yeah, I've called it Mount Fatherest.
Yeah, that's a good name for it. That's a good name for it. Nelson Dellis, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. Honestly, the privilege was all ours, and we will talk very, very soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Everett Themer and The Encounter coming up next on Spaced Out Radio.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness. We expose what lies beneath.
We are encountering The Encounter tonight on Spaced Out Radio. As Everett Themer joins us, take a look around the world of the news of the day. The news is always changing, and that's why we bring you The Encounter. And don't forget, you can find The Encounter right now on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/SOR The Encounter. Give it a like if you don't mind. Everett Themer, great to have you back with us, my friend. I don't know if you just caught the last 2.5 hours, but honestly, that was some of the most powerful and intense radio I think I've ever done in my life.
That was fantastic. I feel like I've been there now, and I don't have to go.
I don't know if I would go. Like, even if I was in some sort of shape, let's take Dave back, 25 years to his hockey playing body, which I haven't seen in a quarter century now. I still don't know if I would train for this. There is just something really, really manly or womanly about this that it's that ilk I just do not have.
Oh, I don't think I have it either. I would love to think I could do it, but I didn't realize that it was a 1 to 2 month process to even do it.
I know. What did you think of Nelson's talk that, you know, when I hit him with the question, would you want your body to stay up there if you died? And he said yes. Like, that's a reality type question, man.
It is, and actually he kind of changed my point of view on it. I can understand his thinking and the way he explained it, and I think that now, at this point, I can understand it, and I think that they should be left where they are unless the family specifically wants them back for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you got that right, my friend. You got that right. It's very rare that I get scared in an interview. Okay, this one literally scared me. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of audience members will be like rolling their eyes when I say that and, you know, saying, you know, like, come on, what was scary about that? But when you put yourself in that person's shoes and you try to use your imagination as to what they are going through, where you are coughing up pieces of lung and your best friend at that same time can't control her bodily functions after summiting, you know, because she's passing out and, you know, the body is trying to compensate to keep other parts moving. That's a brutal reality that I don't know if I would ever have the balls to put myself into that situation. I just can't see myself doing that.
You know, after listening to that, I don't know that I could either. We hear about people climbing and we hear about people passing on during the climb, but you don't really hear that much about how brutal it is to get to that point. I mean, I had never thought about, you know, the pulmonary edema or the losing your bodily functions or even the idea of coughing up part of my lung never occurred to me.
No. Eerie. Absolutely eerie. On the flip side, we have you from the Encounter Online here, bringing us the weird, the strange, and the WTF news of the day. Fill us in on what's happening around the world, man.
Well, you know, I hate to go a little political, but today I found the story about a 16-year-old boy who was eating with his friends at a chain called Whataburger when an unidentified man came up to him and ripped the hat off of his head and threw a drink in his face simply because the hat was one of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again hats.
Really?
Yes. And there is a video of this circulating.
Yes,
you know,
I did see that video, yes.
Essentially, the kid, I won't name him because he is under 18, but he claims, and it appears in the video, it was completely unprovoked. This other gentleman, for lack of a better term, simply saw the hat and kind of attacked him. And I will give this kid some credit because he made a statement that he would rather see discussions on different political views rather than something like this, that even at his age, he can see that having the talk is much more productive than two sides yelling at each other.
You know, the video, as you're telling this story, actually just popped up on my Facebook feed, and I'm watching it. I mean, this guy, he's got to look, you know, maybe late 20s, early 30s, steals the kid's hat, and then calls the 16-year-old kid a BAMFer. You know, I guess the way I look at it, and I'm not sure if this guy has a job or not anymore, but if I was his employer, I'd probably can him for this because it's kind of embarrassing to picking on a kid. But at what point, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or up here in Canada, conservative, a liberal, or a Democrat, at what point did we lose the ability to stop communicating and just have a discussion rather than trying to incite arguments and violence?
I think it's been degenerating to this point for a long time. And it's not just the Trump era. It goes back a while, and it's a little disturbing and kind of sad.
I think it totally is. You know, I mean, look, I have friends of mine I don't agree with politically, right? But that doesn't make me want to hit them or throw drinks in their face or even strangers. Why can't we just discuss things? That's how problems get solved, man. You know, like I hate to, sound Mr. Greenpeace here. You know, I really do. But at what point, at what point, I mean, this goes, we just had on earlier this week, the guy in Vancouver who was fired from his job at the tea house in Stanley Park for kicking out an American tourist who was wearing a MAGA hat.
Yeah. At some point, I think we need to realize that discussions solve more than just arguing. And when you surround yourself with people who only see your point of view, nothing is really going to change. People need to open up and start having these conversations. Maybe it goes back to we need to begin teaching classes like debate and rhetoric in high school again.
Maybe, or good quality snark. And I know there's a few on Twitter who could teach those courses. But you know what, Everett? I think, though, for the purpose of journalism and everything, we have to hear the other side of the story, because usually for every action, there is a reaction. And this kid may be the typical teenager who is saying, I didn't say anything. But in the meantime, maybe he, like I'm reading Jeff on Twitter here at hashtag Spaced Out Radio, where he typed in, allegedly, a witness said the kid was joking about hanging black people from trees prior to the hat and drink incident. Guy that did that has so far lost his job. Well, if the kid did do that, okay, is that worth the consequence? Because it's the same thing, whether it's, I'm going to use a hockey term. The referee never sees the action. He always sees the reaction and the retaliation. And that's what we are seeing on this. So we do have to play both sides on this too.
We do.
So that's just the way I'm looking at it. Story number 2.
Well, are you familiar with African poaching, rhino horns, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it makes me sick to my stomach, man. Yeah.
Well, 2 suspected rhino poachers were eaten by lions in a South African wildlife preserve. And
really?
They're not positive that it's 2. It could possibly be more. There were so few remains left that they can't completely identify them, and they do believe that it is 2, but it could be more. All apparently in search of the rhino horn, which in Asia is believed to have some aphrodisiac properties.
Like Viagra. Rhino horn gets you horny, apparently.
It just seems easier to go to your doctor and get a prescription than try and buy some black market rhino horn.
Yeah,
possibly more effective.
So these guys who were out hunting for the rhinos, the lions said, yeah, we've had enough of that. And they ripped them to shreds. That's the story.
Yes.
Karma got them good. Karma got them good.
The bigger issue, though, is that in the past decade, about 7,000 rhinos have been poached.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think it's definitely a serious issue, and it's sad. We've had many cases of different things like this, but to go out there and do something like that is pretty disgusting to me.
Me too. And at some point, the world, has to wake up and realize, whether it's whales and, Iceland and Japan still take a huge, huge knock from environmentalists and ocean supporters that, we got to stop killing whales. We got to stop killing sharks for fins. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those videos of sharks being definned and then they just throw the alive shark right back into the ocean. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting, and then we wonder why our planet is so screwed up. You know what? The lions deserve to win one here. They really do deserve to win one over these poachers. But at some point, until countries like China and Japan and Iceland, to name 3, and I know there's more, start waking up to the process that you cannot get these animals back. All right, you can't. We already lost a rhino species last year. Gone, poof, kaput. What more do we need? Right? I don't know. That subject just pisses me off.
Really, to me, there's nothing we need off of a rhino. They should be just left to wander and live their lives through nature.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't tell me that the poachers aren't going to get another career, and you'd have to feel for, and I hate to say this, but looking at the other side, I'm sure these poachers were a lot of poor African men, okay, doing a job that this is how they feed their family or maybe their village, by killing a rhinoceros or an elephant for its tusks, or whatever. And I could see where really they have no choice but to do it because the money is so good. That's why it has to start at the political level, where they got to get their heads out of their asses and realize through science that shark fins do nothing to help you. Okay, rhinoceros horns do not make you get or make you feel more stimulated sexually. And elephant tusks, well, they just continue growing. Why kill the elephant?
Well, with the elephant tusks, now they are tinting them with a dye.
A pink dye.
Yeah, so that it essentially makes the ivory worthless.
I think it's perfect. It's sad that we have to do that, but it's perfect.
It definitely is.
Next story, my friend.
Do you want to talk about Belgab, or do you want to talk about the naked man driving through Calgary?
Oh, we're going to get both of them. Let's go to let's spend some time on Belgab here. Tell people who don't know what Belgab is.
Well, Belgab was an online forum kind of revolving originally around Art Bell and Coast to Coast when he was on it. And it kind of evolved into just sort of a series of threads of discussions covering everything sort of paranormal radio or any of the different shows. There were so many threads on there. And these people were twisted and sarcastic, and I missed them. But the other night, was it last night? Essentially, the website was just shut down. And nobody seems to know exactly why as of yet.
Brutal. That's like 10 plus years of information on Belgab. And for most of our listeners, you probably wouldn't like it. Okay. It was like snark porn. So if you weren't into sarcastic, vain humor, I would highly suggest never going there. Well, you can't now because the website is down. But I wonder why MV shut it down.
I don't know, but I mean, even now I miss it. I mean, those people were craftsmen in sarcasm and snark, and it was beautiful artwork to just watch some of those threads unfold. People spent hours just having fun making comments, and sometimes you learn a little something about somebody. Sometimes you just have a great laugh. But it was a lot of people on there just continuing the talks on various different paranormal radio and media things.
No kidding. It is sad. It is sad. And you know what? It's sad when eras come to an end. But, I mean, maybe the owner's heart wasn't into it anymore after, the Art Bell passing and then some of the fiasco that seemed to take place after that. I mean, it's sad, but, maybe it's time to move on. And maybe there's another group out there, that everybody can go snark with.
That could be. I mean, with Art Bell being laid to rest, maybe it's time to lay down or let Belgab rest for a while.
I hate it when eras come to an end, man. I do. I hate it when eras come to an end. It bothers me.
There were times where it seemed like I went days without sleep just to keep up with these people, just to read their stuff. I didn't post all that often on there, but I would read for hours. And if you walk away, all of a sudden there'd be 10, 20, 30 new pages of comments on a particular thread. And I'd have to sit there and read all of them. And these people were creative. They took this stuff seriously, and it was fun.
Well, you know what? I'm sure there will be something else that pops up that goes on. But, I mean, hey, it's an end of an era in high-quality snark and paranormal radio, and I'm sure our terrestrial people are like, what the hell are they talking about? But in the paranormal world, this is actually kind of big news.
It is.
All right, I think we got time for Calgary Guy.
Okay, well, there was a gentleman who took a postal vehicle for a ride and was undressing as he was driving it, ended up driving it naked. Eventually, he abandoned it and ran out of the truck and into the neighborhood completely naked.
Wow.
And as of right now, they haven't identified him, and they don't know if he was an employee of the Postal Service or not, but they're trying to determine, should they charge him with, vehicle theft? But if he was a postal employee, possibly just some sort of like disorderly conduct charge would be filed.
What kind of drugs do you have to be on, or how emotionally unstable do you have to be to snap, to rip your clothes off and drive down the highway, then run around town naked?
Well, they haven't identified the suspect yet, but when they do have, I should clarify, they do have him in custody. But, when he comes off of whatever he was on, I think he's got some explaining to do.
No kidding. Holy cow.
I don't like being naked in the shower. There's no way I'm going to be naked driving a postal truck around town. That's just a good way to get people to look at you.
No way, man. I walk through my front yard shirtless and people are yelling Sasquatch. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Well,
that's horrible.
I'm Ukrainian, man. We're all beasts. But nonetheless, it's I hope that, they figure out what snapped in this guy, because usually it's something. There's always a story that leads to someone just snapping like that. And, thank goodness he decided to remove his clothes rather than to do something stupid and heinous as we've seen in the past with other incidents.
That's definitely true.
If that's the worst case scenario, I think we're doing all right. And you know what? He probably ran naked because Calgary is a pretty good party town. Let's be honest. For those of you who haven't partied in Calgary, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it, especially during Stampede. It's a good time. Very, very good time.
I might have to try that sometime. Fly up there, and then you can tell the story of me.
I would love to on the encounter. Let's get to the thought of the Dave. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where during the day we post a question on our Facebook page, along with Twitter, and then we read your responses to those questions, because we love audience participation around here. So today's Thought of the Dave sticks to our topic with Nelson Dellis. And that is, what do you think should be done with the bodies that are littering Mount Everest? Now remember, there's over 375 people who have died on the mountain. Up on the mountain, there's over 280 bodies. Some of them they've never recovered. Everett, we're going to start with you on this one. What do you think? Leave the bodies where they are, or try and figure out a way to bring them down and repatriate them?
I think that they should just leave them where they are unless the families request, and the body can be moved in an efficient and safe manner.
But that's the problem. Efficient and safe, because you're going to have to put a lot of Sherpas up on the mountain to try and create that safety zone, man.
Is there a reason they can't just fly a helicopter up there and then lower a basket and a couple of rescue workers down?
I don't know.
To remove some of these?
I really don't know. I mean, they're at 28,000 feet. Are there a lot of, I don't know that well in helicopters. Maybe somebody could fill us in the chat rooms. But are there helicopters that can fly at that altitude?
That air might be a little thin.
I really don't know. Combine that with the winds. I mean, you're putting a lot of people at danger, man. A lot of people at danger. I think, in listening to Nelson when he said that he prefers that the bodies stay up there because they are monuments. They are monuments, a lot of them. Some of them are landmarks. But, I mean, like he said himself, that if he passed away on Everest, he would want to stay up there. But, I mean, that way you're not putting anybody else in danger. I don't know about that, man. I don't know. Let's see what you had to say for the audience. Jeff jumps in right off the bat on Facebook. They should be left there, not only because it's a memorial, but to show the dangers of the climb. They assumed the risk climbing that mountain. Also, why should others put their lives on the line to remove bodies from there, some that have been there since the 1920s? It's easy to say, but eventually, Everett, you have to think the more people that die up there, the more dangerous it is going to become for the hikers and mountaineers.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right.
I think at some point they're going to have to do something. Maybe not right now, but in the future, maybe well beyond our expiry dates, they're going to have to, because the mountain's going to stick around for a long time. We're not. Gary states, try to remove, if possible, and return to their homes and family. Separate topic, get all the leftover garbage off the mountain as well, and they are working on that. And Nelson had addressed that as well. Stephen jumps in. Other humans will find them in 20,000 years after we're all wiped out. Yeah, and they'll still be in good shape. Probably. Chuck, I don't think that anyone should risk their lives retrieving them. They had to know before they started there was a chance they would never leave the mountain. And maybe, Everett, that's part of the romanticism of it all, is dying there so you could become a landmark like Green Boots.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, would you go through all that effort and expense with the idea of possibly becoming a landmark as a goal? I mean, I'm sure none of these people are particularly happy about their outcome, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you to Mr. Skeptic on Twitter, who says the maximum altitude which can be reached during forward flight typically depends more on the ability of the engine to breathe the thinner air than the rotor's ability to provide lift. Turbine engine helicopters can reach around 25,000 feet, so we're still 3,000 feet short where a lot of these bodies are. So thank you for clarifying that. Absolutely. Let's get to Twitter here. Oscar says, who's going to bury the gravediggers when they drop dead ascending the mountain? It could be a never-ending cycle. I think that the climbers knew the risks involved and are probably at peace with where their bodies are. I agree with that one.
Yeah.
Catherine, as nice as it would be to rescue the remains, the world has decided to claim them while they did something they loved. They are best left for wildlife. God of Thunder, otherwise known as Canadian Joe on Twitter. Maybe just give them a proper burial on site. Well, a lot of the bodies they can't even get to. They just cannot get to the bodies.
And how would you bury them there anyway? Wouldn't you just be putting them in more snow?
Probably rocks and make almost like a cenotaph or something, build it on up.
A lot of effort, though.
It is.
A lot of effort for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Then once again, safety comes into play. John, leave them as a dark, grim reminder of how dangerous it is to climb. Gail, leave them. It is as dangerous to attempt retrieval as the climb itself. Renee, I think it's too dangerous to retrieve these bodies. Time to leave them. Put up a memorial at the bottom of the mountain and shut down all attempts to let others climb that treacherous mountain ever again, as well as a warning sign to anyone thinking of attempting it that nobody will come looking. Ooh, that's a little vicious. But she may have a point. At some point it's going to become an environmental problem. So you do have to run with that as well. Bill Cardwell says there is little that can be done about the bodies that currently rest on the mountain, but something can be done about how future summits are achieved. A very heavy retrieval deposit should be assessed to every team or individual who goes beyond base camp. If you return, a portion is returned to you, and the remainder goes into a fund to pay for future cleanup and repatriation of those lost souls. I think that's a good one, my friend, and that's probably a good place to end this one. Everett Themer, thanks for a great show and great news on the Encounter Online. Tell our audience where they can find the Encounter.
They can find the Encounter at facebook.com/SOR, the Encounter Online.
Perfect. Thank you. We will talk to you tomorrow night with Faux News Friday. Yes.
Always going to be fun.
If you haven't heard that yet, it's a lot of fun. We also want to say thank you to Nelson Dellis for giving us an amazing interview about Mount Everest and what it's like to almost die on the mountain. He was in for the first 2.5 hours. His website, nelsondellis.com. Same name, Nelson Dellis, on his YouTube channel. So if you're a fan of this show, make sure you go and hit subscribe on his YouTube channel as well. Tomorrow night on the program, our Keith Andrews is back with another edition of the ET Connection, where we will welcome your participation, all things extraterrestrial, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everyone listening at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. I do apologize to the Periscope crowd tonight. We're having some troubles there with the microphones. We're going to try and get it figured out. There is a way we can do it. We're going to try different ways. We are working on it. Big thanks to everybody at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter. Spreaker crowd, you were amazing tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. And, of course, the veterans in the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. Good to see you, Miss Claudia. It had been a while. Same as you, the fabulous Rano. Thanks for sharing the show. Thanks for telling your friends and doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night. See you tomorrow.